I want to say welcome to Mr. Lawrence here. I Never Knew TV. I know we're supposed to link up for a long time. We are finally here at the right time in the right space. How's everything?
Hey, good, man. I'm glad to be here, man. It's an honor for me. Honor, truly an honor.
I want to start off, just please give me a brief breakdown of how it was growing up. You told me that your mother was 23 when she had you. You're the only boy amongst three sisters, and you grew up in Ohio in the projects. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was rough, man. Because when you grow up, particularly in the housing projects, which our housing projects was called Sullivan Gardens. Sullivan Gardens was the roughest, the toughest, the baddest, the meanest, the most dangerous housing projects in Central Ohio. Ironically, Sullivan Gardens was nicknamed Madison Square Gardens because there was a lot of things going on in the neighborhood in terms of the violence, the mayhem, all of the chaos, So when you grow up in this environment, it really messes with you. And I always talk about anything that can mess with your mind can cause pain in your body. So you don't realize that. So growing up in a house full of women, I had three older sisters, single parent mom. And I remember asking my mom, I said, "Mom, did you breastfeed me?" And then she said, "Of course not." She said, "I had three other kids that I had to contend with." So you grow up with these deficits. And these deficits, when I talk about this biochemical grid, just like a game, it was called Operation. So Operation, people who remember Operation, if you touch the side of it, right, you lose your turn. But your biochemical grid, right, it's either going to be activated by having those good relationships, what it's supposed to, it's going to be deactivated in terms of not having those or having insecure attachments, not having people who there for you in terms of the care and the nurturing and the supporting, all of those things. So I grew up like that. And then I also grew up without a father. And when you grow up without a father, it really messes with you. And I say, let me take that back. Every child has a father, but not every child has a daddy. So father is a biological term where a mother and a father, right, have a child. The father gives 23 chromosomes to that child or to that children. But a dad is a title you earn through relationship. It's a biochemical tune where you and your child can draw from in your time of need, and you can draw from, just like a bank account, right? So that's why I use the distinction between father and dad. And I remember, my mom would tell me, she'd say, "Son, your father called." I was like, "Wow, he called," right? He's like, "Hey, he's coming to see you." And I remember I would give up my time to wait for this man. Now, I grew up in a time when you didn't stay in a house unless you were in trouble, or if the weather was bad, or you had to eat, or it's time to go to sleep, right? That was it. But outside of that, right, you were always outside from sun up to sundown, right? And I know times have changed, but I remember when my mom would say, hey, son, your father's coming to see you. And I would stare out the window and I would wait for this man. And he never showed up when he said. Now, he came over 3 times unannounced, but never when he said he was going to be there. So again, messes with you in terms of trust issues and all those things. So I know a lot of people can remember their father not coming to see them or support them. Also, when it comes to you playing sports, and I play sports. I love playing football. Was my first love. And I remember playing Little League football. And I remember I was 12 years of age. We had senior day. So not senior in high school, but senior day in terms of this football team. And all of the kids had to walk out who were seniors with their parents. I was the only child who walked across that field without his mother or his father. I was by myself. I never forgot that. And it hurt me even being 54 years of age. So therefore, when my kids have something, I'm always going to be there. I'm always going, unless I have to, I'm out of town or something like that, I'm always going to be there. But my child was very tumultuous, just like a lot of young people, that grow up in the hood, or maybe those who are listening right now. But I always say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. You can have a bad start, but you can have a better finish. But the only way you do that is if you deal with that little boy, that little girl, and you need to go back and you need to address some of those things. Because if you do not, it's going to keep knocking on the door and keep demanding that you address it. And for a lot of people, they never really want to go back there. So my childhood, I talk about it a lot when I talk to kids, and you revisit a lot of things. And I think you have to do that so that people can see what you went through, they can draw from, and they can be able to understand that you truly understand them because you can empathize because you stand, or you did stand, where they currently are today. So I think it's very important for people to share their life stories with people.
Do you feel your father felt the shame? Because I think a lot of men feel ashamed of their position, and that leads them to deal with the child the way that they do.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting, because he was an alcoholic, I always say when someone is an alcoholic, and particularly if they come from a traumatic background, what are they trying to drown out? Because if you think about all of the drinking, they're drowning something out, but they can never get away from it. That's why they're constantly trying to get to that original high, which is from the drink. So I do believe that until I really started understanding the biochemistry and how we're wired and how people seek outside sources to deal with internal deficits. You know, most people are looking for surface level solutions to deep-rooted problems. That's when I started understanding my father, and I was able to release him from that, even though he passed away when I was 16. So I didn't go to his funeral. He was 40. What's ironic, he drank a 40 ounce every day, and he dies at the age of 40. And I remember my mom said, "You want to go to his funeral?" I was like, "Hell no." I was like, I didn't know him, right? And she was like, "Hey, watch that language." And I was like, no, because it was like, wait, how were you telling me you want me to go to a funeral of a guy that I don't know and who didn't care anything about me? But once I started understanding the biochemistry, how important it is to have a mother and a father, more specifically, a mom and a dad, that's when I started thinking about, man, I got to really hammer home in terms of my commitment with my own 2 kids. Then I started understanding how important it is to release and to forgive. Even though he passed away, I had to do it in my own mind to be able to move on past that time and that trauma.
And before we get into the chemistry part, right, I want to speak about the release, which is so important for a lot of brothers, right? Not just with the father, but many things. Many men are holding on to a lot of things that are holding them back. When did you first identify, like, man, this thing is really kind of pushing me to do things that's detrimental to myself? And what was the process of releasing that hurt, hate, or pain you had from your father?
Yeah, you know, like a lot of kids in the hood, you know, even though I was a very gifted student, I love sports, right? Because sports gave me something that I didn't have, particularly being around coaches. You can get what you don't have on the home front because you have coaches, right? You can still get that. So that's why I played a lot of sports, right? I remember in the wintertime, I played basketball. In the springtime, I played baseball. In the summertime, it was track and field. And then in football was in the fall. But I love playing football. That was my favorite sport, right? All the way up until high school, because you can hit people and not go to jail for it, right? I love being hit, and I love hitting others. And I didn't realize that the biochemistry, particularly when it comes to neurotransmitters, there's something called endorphins. Endorphins deals with the pain to get to the pleasure. So I had to take the hits, be hit, right, to build my own system. And I always say this, the one parent who's supposed to be balancing and helping you with that side of your neurotransmitter system is supposed to be your father. The resiliency. We talked about productive struggle. They talk about this term in school or whatever. All it is just resiliency, being able to push past the difficulty, the challenges, to be able to get to the pleasure, but you got to first go through the pain. So I did sports. I'm hyper competitive. Anything that I do, I'm always competing. And then my wife's like, you know, we're playing Uno. You don't have to win at everything, right? She was saying, but I'm so competitive. But I realize it's feeding my own biochemistry. The problem is, you typically, if you have a deficiency in one area, you trade it in for some type of addiction down the road, right? Even competition can be very addicting.
The question I have is, though, right, can you explain what happens biologically when a child is not breastfed and does not receive enough oxytocin?
Yeah. You know, I remember when I started learning about all these different things, and I said, I knew I was a marked young person at an early age because my biochemistry was off. And when I learned about oxytocin, so oxytocin, not to be confused with Oxycontin, I'm going to talk a little bit about my drug addiction as well. Oxytocin, Pitocin, when they give a pregnant mother Pitocin, that's to induce the labor pains so the baby can come out, right, and be born naturally, okay? So that's Pitocin, which is the synthetic version of oxytocin. Also, the breast milk. So breast milk, prolactin produces the breast milk, but it's released through oxytocin, right? And then also, too, when the baby is breastfeeding from a mother, right, not 25% of the time, 50% of the time, 75% of the time, typically almost 100% of that time, that child is nursing looking at the mother's what? Eyes. there's oxytocin receptor sites in your eyes. And whatever we give our continual gaze to, we typically bond with, my brother. So I remember, and I asked my mother because...
Hold on, say that again for the people.
Yeah, man,
say
look.
That again, please.
Whatever we give our continual gaze to, we typically bond with, right? That's why it's very important for you to watch what you see, right? And what you look at. But not only what you look at, but what you can imagine and what you can project in your mind is very important. So oxytocin is largely shaped from the mother. It's for three things: bonding, usually, and other things. Bonding, trusting, and loving is really what oxytocin is about. And they know this, that if your oxytocin system, it's like a biochemical grid. And I think about, there was a game called Operation. I mean, you're a little younger than me, but
I remember that.
You remember Operation? Yeah, you stick it in. So your body comes like a blank canvas, but something has to activate it, or something can keep it what? Deactivated, right? In terms of, right, trauma, abuse, neglect, all those different things. So oxytocin, they know this, that if your oxytocin system, bonding, trusting, and loving, is not properly developed by the age of 2 or 3, you have a greater likelihood of addiction down the road. And I realized, looking back at the addictions that I had, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, did you breastfeed me when I was a child? She said, of course not. I didn't breastfeed you. I had 3 other kids that I had to contend with besides you. And I realized your immune system, your ability to connect, so many things are so important when it comes to the oxytocin production in your body, and we don't realize how important it is. But it's not just oxytocin, which is a neuropeptide, not actually a neurotransmitter, but it acts like one. But so many of these things are systems off, and we don't understand that we're setting ourselves up for addiction down the road because of the down payment that we paid in terms of childhood, in terms of neglect, abuse, alienation, right? All humiliation, all those things, and we never even realize that these things are happening to us.
And I appreciate that explanation, because I have a lot of conversation with people on how we view drug addiction, and we don't view it from a biological standpoint. It's almost a shaming in a sense,
Yeah,
like it's your fault, and we don't understand the things
Right.
that lead the person to be chemically dependent
Absolutely.
on something,
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? My grid, because of what happened to me, will always be in some ways altered. So there are certain things that I have to do in order to avoid falling back right in the mess, right, that I was in. I always say you're one step away from falling right back in the addiction that you were in, right? And I realized that. So that's why having a relationship with the Most High, right? Having a wife, being married almost 27 years, a sister, right? Having 2 kids, having a sense of purpose, exercise. I still hoop even at 54 because a true baller never retired. I'm in shape, right? Oh yeah, especially when a young cat start talking trash. I say cats, I'm showing my age. But all of those things are very important for my biochemistry. And when I get away from that, my circadian rhythm changes, and then I change, right? And then I was like, oh, my wife's like, what is wrong with you, right? So I have to do that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about professional athletes and how when they walk away from their sport, if they don't fill it with productive things, it becomes very counterproductive and destructive.
And this man saying a lot of things. So you spoke about the importance of basically consistency and having a rhythm. And what I've learned with my own self is that when I deviate from my rhythm, things could go away real quick.
Yeah.
I have the same thing where I have to I do the same thing all the time, and I can't deviate it. But the more I learn, it's just like that's how nature works.
Right.
Nature's on a pattern. Nature's on a rhythm.
Yeah, your body gets used to it. So it's not only circadian rhythm, which is the 24-hour cycle that your body goes through, right? In terms of when you sleep, when you wake up, in terms of elimination, all of those things, in terms of your hormones, in terms of when they circulate and those types of things. That's your circadian rhythm, which is controlled from an area of your brain, right? And it's very important for you to understand this, because when you think about your circadian rhythm, that's one aspect, but then you have something called your circumceptive rhythm. So circumceptive rhythm is how your body operates over a period of days, set days, like a week. That's why you see certain kids and certain people flip out on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday or whatever the case may be, because their rhythm is off, right? And then once you don't have a rhythm, particularly if you grow up in the hood like me, things are chaotic. So your body's in a chaotic state and you don't even know how to function normally. And we talked about that off air. So the rhythm of your body is so important with kids. That's why people say, oh man, in the hood, you give somebody a job. and then they change or whatever. It's not the job, it's the rhythm that gets them to the job, because they got to go to sleep, they got to get up. You know what I'm saying though, right? You're like, I got to go to work. That's what it is. They think it's the money in the job. No, it's the rhythm of the body getting used to the day they got to go to work, and also the work week, which is what I talked about, the circadian rhythm, you know?
You're a high school All-American, right? You're there doing your thing, you're hooping. You initially went to Indiana University. You had a unique experience that most people never have, and a lot of people think about. What was it like being under the guidance of Bobby Knight?
Yeah, so for people who know Bobby Knight, obviously Bobby Knight, it was, you know, his way or the highway. Coach Knight is a legend. You know, I think when you think about the great minds, yes, you know, Dean Smith, you think about John Wooden, you think about Mike Krzyzewski, absolutely great minds. But Coach Knight might have been the most talented coach in terms of his intellect and how he went about things. The problem is he didn't do a very good job of relating to people on a touch level, in terms of a connection level, right? There was always this distance there. So I actually went to Indiana first before I transferred to Ohio State, and I played for Coach Knight, and he was the only coach that I've ever played for out of all the coaches who I felt wanted to win more than the players. And it was our job to appease him so that we don't fall under his wrath. And that's how you felt. And it was such a weird thing, because in a way he was like bigger than the game. Like, I played for a lot of coaches. I played for John Calipari. I played for all these different coaches. But he was a coach who was like almost bigger than the game. And it was so weird. It was like being around like a Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or, you know, someone like that, because of how powerful their persona was. You know what I mean? And he could tell you what you did right at the beginning of the game and the end of the game. The problem is military. I'm going to build you up. I'm going to break you down. I'm going to build you up. I'm going to break you down. So he always played a lot of those head games with people. And when I played in the NBA, I met Doug Christie, who's a coach for the Sacramento Kings. We were on the elevator in Seattle. He looked at me. He gave me that look like you did. He gave me that look. He said, I just got one question to ask. Can you tell me about Bobby Knight? Because that's what people, they want to know. And then I tell them these stories. There's a lot of different stories, right? And he was so, because he asked me in a way like, man, I don't know, man. You know, Fundy kind of crazy too, man. He might come at me a different way. And then I talked to him about Coach Knight, because he is such an enigmatic figure, or he was such an enigmatic figure, that people were so captivated by him because of his personality and how volatile he was. But in terms of his brain, it was really scary, man, because he could tell you to a T throughout the whole game what you did right and what you did wrong. Man, I'd never been around anybody like that.
He mastered the craft.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. But he was so consumed with it. You could see even as he got older, how it impacted different parts of his brain based on how he was wired from coaching. Mm-hmm.
All right. You didn't grow up with the father, right?
Right.
Do you think because you didn't grow up with a father,
right,
your reaction to Bobby Knight was impacted by that?
Yeah, so here it is. So when I came out in 1989, class of 1989. So the top five, typically in most of the periodicals that are out there in terms of the rankings, you had.
Be modest, bro. You can just say what it was, yeah.
No. Yes, yeah. So you had Kenny Anderson.
Man was the top five player.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenny Anderson was number one, right? I was number two, right? Shaquille O'Neal was number three. Right, I tell kids that, and I said, but he had a better career than me. I said, but I was ranked higher than him. Jimmy Jackson, who's on TV, number 4, and then Allen Houston was number 5.
That's a wild class.
Those are class. But what's interesting is where they all got drafted. They were all lottery picks except me, and maybe we can talk about that. But you know, when you're rated that high, you so many things come, you know, and people talk about NIL. I'm like, man, NIL existed. Oh, it's just illegal back then in terms of things that were going down, right? But you realize growing up without a father, right? That's what I was looking. And here's the thing. People don't know this, a lot of people. I got kicked off my senior year in high school. And I realized that if you don't play your senior year in high school, you cannot play in a McDonald's All-American. To this day, I've never watched the McDonald's All-American because I didn't play in it. And I remember they were talking about me at that game, because that's when Shaquille O'Neal, that was his coming out party in 1989, because back then, Texas, you couldn't play outside. You couldn't play AAU, you couldn't play in tournaments that weren't sanctioned.
I know that.
Yeah, back then you couldn't do that. So that's when everybody found out about Shaquille O'Neal in the McDonald's All-American game. I didn't play. I wasn't there. And I always said too, in all of the interviews, I need discipline. Now hold on for a second. A dad provides three things, and this is the endorphin system: drive, determination, and discipline. That's what a daddy's supposed to provide. I was really crying out at that age for some representation of a dad. But I didn't realize it because I just didn't know at that time. I'm 17, 18 years of age.
Did you have
But that
high school coaches or anything?
I did. I had coaches, don't get me wrong, but when you are short-sighted, when you are slighted by not having that aspect to you, there's a yearning to get it.
Biologically.
Yeah, you need it constantly, right? It's not just one time, it's not just one, you know what I mean? You constantly need it. And the problem is, even though you have these different people, they can never quite fill that void, right? And then I realized that because you know that, right? Former teacher, when you go around these kids, man, you see kids, they just gravitate to you. And you think, me, it's not, they didn't even watch me playing basketball. They weren't even born. It's what I provide in terms of biochemically that they pick up on, that they get. And I didn't realize that's what I was missing. And then subsequently, some of the things that I had to deal with, particularly on the addiction side.
How are you told me you were drinking a lot.
Yeah.
How are you balancing the substances and hooping?
Yeah. You know, when you look at athletes, the thing that athletes are able to do is compartmentalize.
I think athletes are better actors than actors in Hollywood, but
No, I agree with that. I agree with that because, like, so many things could be going on. You got family issues, maybe in terms of with your ladies, and you got this, and you got all these different things, and you compartmentalize all of that and focus at the time on what you need to do, which is hooping, right? So you start doing all those things, and you become very good. The problem is, like juggling, when you start adding a bunch of different, balls to your juggling, then that's when you're gonna start dropping stuff, right? Then you start slipping, right? So that's what happens with a lot of people. So, but for me, school was so easy, I never studied. Even though I graduated magna cum laude, I got 3 degrees, it was so easy for me because of my foundation. But you get caught up on this treadmill and you start juggling all these things, and then you realize that, man, you can't do it. The problem is you have to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? In terms of that, because all of these deficits, all these different things, and then eventually things catch up to you, and it's just like, now, man, like you're just totally dealing with brokenness. And most athletes, especially pro athletes from the hood, they're just running from the pain that they went through. And just like Roadrunner and Wild E. Coyote, whenever you get to your next destination, guess what? You're going to still deal with the same old you. It's going to catch you.
You know what I tell people, and you can understand this, right? So a person to say like, man, why you never made it to the league, or why you never this and that? One, I wasn't good enough, and I didn't have enough pain.
Wow.
Fire, you need a certain pain to excel at each level.
You do.
And I didn't have enough I didn't have enough hurt inside of me to propel me or give me the grit for the other thing.
Yeah. The pain.
It's a harsh reality, but
no,
we don't
it is.
talk about it.
To this day, at 54, I have to have pain. Like I literally work out. I work out, not where I beat my body up and I cause injuries, but in terms of that threshold, those endorphins, I need that. I'm a former drug addict. Opiates was one of my drugs, which deals with your endorphin system, right? And I tell people, any opioid addiction leads to an endorphin deficiency. Your endorphin system shuts down because you're bringing outside sources to deal with these internal deficits. That's the way drugs work. It shuts the body's ability, and then that's when you go through withdrawals, you build up tolerance, all that stuff, right? So especially if you walk away from it. So that's why it's important for me to constantly be dealing. So think about this for a second. It's not only that I put myself in situations where I still have to work, I still have to do this, and I put myself in very grueling situations. I realize that my purpose in life, which I tell people, your purpose in life is the assignment you were placed on this earth to accomplish for the benefit and betterment of others. And for those who give credit and honor to the Most High, then obviously you're held to a higher standard. But when it comes to purpose for me, it's always going to be associated with some type of pain. And the pain is dealing with this. I'm glad you shared this. is dealing with the drop. There was a person in the Bible named Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was dropped by a caregiver at a very early age, right? Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son, and Jonathan was Saul's son, King Saul, right? And then David came. So he was dropped by a caregiver. There was news of an impending a war, and they basically, the caregiver in haste dropped him, and he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. Now, some of us have to deal with the drop. I'm speaking to you, brother. I'm speaking to you, sister, through no fault of our own. Somebody dropped us. It could be a system. It could be a parent. It could be a neighborhood. It could be a job. Whatever the case may be, something drops us that we have to deal with. Now, here's the thing with the drop. The height of the drop, the velocity of the drop, and the impact of the drop will determine the methods, the measures, and the means one uses to deal with that pain. Whatever messes with your mind is going to cause pain in your body. You're going to focus on the drug. It's going to be a drink. It's going to be a drift. It's going to be a drain. It's going to be a drag. It can be whatever the case may be, the doctor, DR. So the thing, when you think about the doctor, they write prescriptions. But sometimes you got to be your own doctor. And guess what? Not only do you have to write your own prescriptions, but you have to deal with the side effects thereof. And a lot of us are doing that. And we keep dealing with the symptoms, but we never get to the root causes. I'm from a neighborhood called Sullivan Gardens. Sullivan Gardens. From there, I should have known I was going to be dealing with some root system issues, and that the only way you deal with the root system issues is you go into the soil, and you're going to have to give your hands dirty, right? But when you go in the dirt, you also deal with the nutrients as well. But you never deal with any offshoots unless you first get to the roots. We are a people who are constantly, I'm talking about black people, overall, we constantly put Band-Aids on problems that's hemorrhaging in our community, in our finances, in our education, in our homes. We constantly do this. But when are we going to deal with the real us in terms of dealing with the root causes and not keep putting a Band-Aid on a problem that's hemorrhaging? We got to get to the frequency. What's that tune? And once we find that tune, we'll be able to understand what's really driving that. And then now when we do that, we can come up with a better game plan or solution as opposed to being reactionary or reactive as a people as opposed to proactive.
As a culture, do you think it's like a collective self-denial?
Mm-hmm.
Like kind of, I don't want to deal with this. Is it a situation where you want to avoid the work to get better, or you just you're in denial about the reality of the situation?
Yeah, you know, when I go into communities, especially our communities, and I talk about improvement, I always talk about there's three things you got to have, the 3 C's. I said the first one you got to take a chance. And by taking a chance in your mind, especially in this system, your vestibular system, in terms of your temporal lobe, that's when you're weighing the balance of the probability of success, watch this, versus the possibility of failure. If the probability or possibility of failure is greater than the possibility or probability of success, what you going to do? You're going to walk away from that. You're not even going to get to the table in order to make improvement, right? Because you're never going to take the chance. So you have to convince them that the scales of justice are in your favor and that you can have success. And I talked to kids, I said, hold a minute. I said, we're going to talk about this. We're going to really talk about what your brain is, because you're not changing anyone unless 3 things. You focus on neuroscience, the brain. You focus on nutrigenomics, which is not only what you eat, but also what eats you in terms of not just food, but in terms of your thought process. And then also neuroplasticity, which is the brain can change. You can change the brain. You can't change the brain. So that's why working with inner city communities, I'm always challenging them and say, look, first of all, you got to take a chance. I said, then you have to exercise choice, where you build your muscles up. This is the resiliency, right? You're talking about the pain. You do that. Once you take a chance, once you exercise choice or choices, then you start what? Building or creating change. So we're trying to change with the wrong method of payment, my brother. And I go in my pocket and I say, look, if you go over to Japan with dollars and you don't convert them into yen, you're not going to be able to buy anything. I said, we have the wrong method of payment and we wonder why we never produce any change. So I talked to them about, we got Apple Pay, we got debit cards, credit cards, you got all this. My question to you is, what method of payment are you continually offering to produce the change that you desire?
and listen to you talk, right? I think about epigenetics now.
Absolutely.
Um, when people mostly speak about epigenetics, they focus on the negative inheritance, but
That's a
there's
good
not
point.
enough conversation about like the positive inheritances.
Yeah,
And as a man, I know, have you, obviously you study epigenetics. What are your
absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we look at genetics and epigenetics. The Bible says that the sins of the father are passed to the third or fourth generation, right? The sins of the father, right? Why? Because in terms of the DNA, in terms of the whole dynamic, in terms of what the father provides. And then you look at epigenetics. Now they're finding out that epigenetics can be passed forward 13 generations. So the hardware doesn't change in terms of your genetics, but because of the environmental priming, right, then that will influence the person in the body, right? And then that's when you start seeing it. So that's why when our ancestors, some of them may have said, I'm never going to be found reading because of the repercussions, right? Because if we had anti-literacy laws, most black people don't even know that anti-literacy laws existed, meaning black people were forbidden from being educated and learning how to read, right? Because we always say this, if you don't want black people to know something, put it where? Put it in a book. So on the plantation, three things were happening if you were found caught reading. Number one, you would be shipped off the plantation at a discount. Then you would be labeled a problem, right? You'd be labeled a problem, a slave. Number two, you would be beaten in front of your peers. Now, one thing we know is observational pain is a huge deterrent, right? That we don't want. We like, hey, we see somebody, we saw what happened to you. Nah, that's not gonna happen to us. So we stay away. Or number three, you could be hung from a tree. Well, trees produce books and book covers. How ironic is that? So we make vows. My point is, in the Bible says, it's better not to make a vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. A lot of us, our ancestors, have made vows. I think even to this day, some kids who hate reading, have a detest for reading, it could have been that vow that their sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth generation grandparents said that has passed forward and then to this day still affecting them. I'm reading a book right now, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. It's very controversial, but there's a lot of basis for this. Now, the issue is not what it does, but just because someone builds or creates a hole, it doesn't mean we have to fall into it as a community. And that's kind of where we are right now. But I was on a thing and I didn't get invited back, but I was talking about epigenetics and how these things, and I said, look, you're telling me to get over what happened in the past to our ancestors when it's embedded in our DNA.
The DNA fire, we can't deny it.
Yeah, how can you avoid that? Now, your choices, but see, you always have the power of choice to change. That's always in your favor. So we can't say we don't have the choice. And that's why when you have the program that you have here, I Never Knew TV, because you give this information, no one can ever say, I didn't know. No one told me. Because whenever you're giving life-transforming information, you're responsible for the instructions that follow.
Facts. And in regards to the epigenetics, right? It's funny how people will acknowledge the inheritance of certain things,
Yeah.
but when it comes to other things now,
Right.
you can't inherit that.
Right.
That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
That's how I know the thing is real. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Well, that's why, like, one of the big things that even though the negative side of epigenetics and genetics, you can flip it around in terms of the positive. That's where you start working on your legacy postscript in terms of what you do that your kids don't have to suffer through. So that's why it's so important for me. And then now my kids never knew, even though we take them around, we show them all of our inner city programs are really geared to our people primarily. And I tell people, look, I care about all people, but I take care of my people first. And I let people know that, right? I don't sugarcoat things. I tell them how it is, and I think you should be that way. So that way our kids can see and they go in there, and then now they're able to understand what I went through, but how fortunate they are, right, in terms of that. So therefore, that's where epigenetics is more in a positive thing. So now they will never have to repeat and go through the same struggles and difficulties, not only that I did, but also my wife, who grew up in a very small town south of Columbus, Ohio, called Chillicothe, Ohio. Both her parents worked in a factory, and they always played it safe. Safe job, secure retirement, and then home ownership. That's what they focused on.
You get drafted in the league, right? You go to the NBA.
Yeah.
And leave all the other stuff behind you. You told me you're able to cut it off cold turkey, right? For those unaware of the young, inspiring players, right? Can you talk about the level of commitment you have to your craft to maintain an NBA career? I'm not talking about to just get in there. I'm talking about to actually stay there for a duration of time.
Right. Yeah. I played 11 years, 3 years overseas, 8 years in the NBA. And when I tell young people all the time, you have to buy into the process of greatness without any guarantee that you're going to have a favorable result. It's a process. And if you have a process, you better have some principles along with that process, right? Or you'll never have the progress. So you got to really get people to understand the process of what it takes to be great without no guarantee that you're going to have a favorable result. So I learned at an early age how to buy into the process. But the problem is that I stopped working when I got to a certain point and I rested. And I thought that success was a resting place and not a journey. Until my rookie year in the NBA, I was playing very well. Was going to probably play in the rookie all-star game until I got hurt. I was averaging about 13 points, 5 rebounds in 21 minutes coming off the bench. And I remember we played against the Chicago Bulls, and I thought, you know, I'm from the hood, I'm going to talk trash. I talk trash to Michael Jordan. Go ahead, man, you can laugh at me. And I can't even tell you what he said because I can't use this language on camera. But he was like, man, this is not Ohio State. I'm like, wow, Michael Jordan used to watch me play. Yeah, because they want to see who they're going to play against. And unlike back then, they watch college. Now they watch what? They go, it's high school now, right? Because it's, you know, it's 1 year removed and you can go to the league. He says, this is not Ohio State. He says, you're on a whole nother level now. He says, you got to bring it every day or else you're going to be in the league and out the league. And here he was. He woke me up to the reality of excellence. Bring in your best every day, no matter how you feel, right? And that here he was, won his 6th NBA championship, and he woke me up to the reality of excellence. I knew it, but I always tell people, when you don't have excellence, bring your best each and every day, no matter what is going on or is at stake or what's happening in the day, you have to bring it. If not, you're going to pay a heavy price for that. When excellence is neglected, there's always a price to pay for it.
Who was the teammate on the Kings at that time, right? Who set the bar in regards to taking care of your body, preparing for the game, and training?
You know, there's a few guys. You know, C. Webb, you know, I think, you know, maybe he had some challenges early on in his career. Then he realized how important it was to be a superstar, to take care of himself.
Between Golden State and the Kings.
The Golden State and the Kings, and then also the Wizards, because he came over from there. One of the guys, and we were close, right? We were close because of our commitment, particularly when it comes to marriage. Doug Christie. Doug Christie, man, was a guy who was a really good player. People don't really remember. Doug Christie was a starter, a very good player, very solid player. Always took care of his body in terms of what he ate. Didn't hang out, and really took the game seriously. I think the kids today, or young people, I say kids because they're young enough to be my kids, but I think a lot of them, they get caught up sometimes in the money as opposed to the meaning. The meaning is what you do and how you're blessed to play this game. And if you focus on the meaning, the money will come. So really getting them to have that, and you learn that, and you're around a lot of different people, right? I've been around some really good players. I think Doug, I'll probably put him at one of the guys at the top of the list, you know, in terms of that. Another guy I have to say, Ben Gordon, who played. Ben Gordon, man, his focus and his diligence. I remember the cat. First of all, I was like, I thought I was doing good. Dude had like a 3-4% body fat, like 3 or 4% body fat. Like I had 6. I'm like, man, that's insane. But how he looked at the game, man, was just real. And I was on my way out. I was 35, and here he was. I think he was probably 21, 22. But you see, like, man, he was very motivating in terms of how he approached the game and how he took care of his body.
Before we want to continue, I remember Doug Christie, and he's a great example of that resilience. I remember when he was with the Knicks.
Yep.
It wasn't the right fit.
It wasn't the right fit.
It wasn't the right system.
Nope.
And for whatever reason, that man kept working. And he got in the right system, and he did really well out there, you know?
Yeah, and you're exactly right, because a lot of times it's not that you can't play, like you said, it's not the right system. The circumstances are not right. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that people should leave their job or a relationship or whatever, but you got to create an environment where you can grow and where you can mature. Exactly. Because really the problem is you can't have growth without friction, but you also have to have the right environment to have that growth. And I think for a lot of people, whether it's basketball, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's marriage, you have to create that atmosphere in order for people to grow. But they also got to buy into the process in terms of what growth will demand of them, and that's going to be friction.
There's a lot of criticism about athletes going broke, right? People don't understand their experience. One, they don't understand how much money they actually get.
That's right.
And depending on your situation and insecurity,
that's right.
They don't understand how much obligation you have to other
Absolutely.
people. Can you break down the reality of how much money an athlete gets after taxes?
Right.
And also the fact that you have, especially when you come from an area where people are looking for money.
Absolutely.
The amount of dependence the average athlete has.
No doubt. You know, you can cut it in half right away. And it may be 60% in terms of what goes to taxes, agent fees. Because if you live, so California, right, it's what, 14, 15% the state tax, plus almost 40% your federal tax. Then you throw on top of that FICA and Medicare taxes, or FICA taxes, which derive, you got Medicare and Social Security. Then you got your agent fees. You got all that. Then you got your family, right? Mama and them, right? So you got all of that. I remember when I signed my contract, my second contract with the Sacramento Kings, I bought my mom a house. I bought my grandmother a house. I bought my sisters, each of them a home. With the two of the three, I bought them a home. The one in California, she was good, but I bought my two sisters a home.
4 homes you bought.
I bought them home.
You just say that's $1 million
but
right
yeah,
there.
but I gave them, I gave them cash on top of it
To maintain.
But I took care of my mom and my grandmother, but my sisters, I put limits on what I was going to do. So I don't change my number because I don't run from nobody, but I let them know where I stand. And that's the problem with a lot of athletes. A lot of athletes are incredibly generous.
Too generous.
Too generous, way too generous, but not understanding their needs in the future, because it's a short time. It's a short window in which you're going to make your money.
Why do you think they're so generous?
I think there's a lot of guilt. You know, my thing was I put limits, but like, say for instance, somebody borrow, right? Somebody say, hey man, can I get 20,000? You give them 2 or 3,000. They counting your chips. You don't count my money, right? But and their focus is, oh, you know, I'm asking for a loan, but it's really a give. And they get mad at you when you want your money back. I'm from the streets. I want my money back. I want my money. If you owe me money, I want my money. It don't matter. I look at $1 or $1,000. It's the same way.
Principle.
I'm from the hood. That's how I look at it. So for a lot of athletes, a lot of them get caught up in trying to be the savior in the Messiah complex. And it is real. It's very real. You feel like your money, you feel like what you do, you feel like your presence, you feel like that can save people. The reality is no one can be saved unless they want to be saved.
And I want to add 2 things. One, when you make a purchase, say you purchase a home for someone, that person doesn't have the money to maintain
Great point.
home.
Great point.
So that's it's an ongoing bill you're putting yourself in.
Yeah.
And I spoke to a brother he's a VP in the league, right? Mm-hmm. And we had a conversation, and he was telling me, he moved up the ranks, so he did all the positions. Mm-hmm. He was telling me, like, a lot of players are rushing back to get to their original point. They feel like the success makes them feel guilty. The success makes them, they struggle with imposter syndrome. But I think more than anything, they feel guilty. It's kind of true when you think about it, because like, one, when you come from certain circumstances that's so messed up,
right, and
like you have these things, you kind of could feel away a little bit about yourself, you know?
Yeah. You know, imposter syndrome is very real, because I got caught up in it a little bit. Even though I'm a cheapskate, I'm very frugal. And I always say, when you grow up in a scarcity environment, and I wrote a book, and by the way, for people who may not know, I'm a certified financial planner, which was the hardest thing I've ever done. I played against Shaq, Kobe, LeBron. I played against all of them. Nothing was harder than passing that CFP test, which was a 10-hour test. Back when I took it, I was studying 9 hours a day to pass it. And my brain was just, I couldn't believe it. But what hurt me more than anything, and I don't share this too much, when I took that test in Cincinnati, there was about 75 people there taking the test. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of people who sell insurance products, mutual funds, etc. but there's very few CFP, certified financial planners. And when I looked around the room, I was the only person that looked like us from our life experiences in that room. That hurt me. That hurt me a lot, right? When it should have been, we're 13% of the population, there should have been 9, 10 people in the room who looked like us. Because CFP, you got to know everything. And you got to know estate planning, insurance planning, tax planning, college planning. You got to know all of that. And that's why it's so important for us to have these conversations so that we're more holistic in terms of how we go about things. And then going back to athletes, you know, a lot of times athletes can focus so much myopically that they don't see the big picture. And as Gale Sayers said it best, Hall of Fame, Chicago Bears, he said athletes should think about the end of their career at the beginning of their career. Because it takes 4 to 8 years to adjust for life after basketball or football or baseball in pro sports. What are you going to do with your life after that? Even though I had 3 degrees, right? I still had to make that adjustment, right? And how much golf can you play? Can you gamble? How much partying can you do? Now you got to go home, and I'm sure you're going to ask me, how you got to deal with being a husband, right? Being a father, right? Or more specifically, hopefully a dad. So you got to deal with all these things. And then when you retire, I tell athletes all the time, when you go in the phone booth, you go from Superman and you come out as Clark Kent permanently. It's over. Bro, it's over. And I tell people, unless you're Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, somebody like that, no one really cares about what you did. Unless you can add value in the marketplace, that's only when people really care. And I realize that, you know, as all of the degrees that I have, the books that I've written, the businesses that my wife and we've created, I sit on the board of a publicly traded mutual fund company. It's all because of the value. It has nothing to do necessarily with the fact that I play basketball. Because you can see highlights and stuff, but it's not adding any value in anyone's life or their legacy.
How was it for you transitioning to civilian life?
Yeah.
And I spoke to a brother, a football player, and he was speaking about how he struggled. He was addicted to the roar.
Absolutely. No question.
And he said he really struggled because he couldn't get that anymore. He couldn't get that, you know.
Well, that's a biochemical. It's a biochemical fix.
Player too, by the way.
Yeah, it's a biochemical fix. Serotonin, which makes you feel good, gives you joy. That's what you feel. Oxytocin, being around people, being in crowds, being in the team setting, right? You're around that, right? Endorphins, being able to be resilient, to push through things. Dopamine, having the anticipation, the motivation, and the justification, right? To be able to show up and to perform. Your biochemistry is taking a hit once you walk away. Right? Now, what do? How do you deal with that? You gonna drink? You gonna smoke? What you gonna do? You gonna snort? What are you gonna do to deal with that, to deal with the biochemistry? So for me, it wasn't that difficult for me. Really, the reality for me was, what did I want to do? And you talked about it. I thought I was gonna do commentating. I like to talk. I think I do pretty decent in terms of running my mouth, but I thought I was gonna be a commentator. The reality is that door got shut. And there's a guy, Jimmy Jackson. Some of you may know Jimmy Jackson. He's on TV. He's great in terms of TNT. He's going to be on the NCAA tournament this year. He does, you know, Fox. We played together at Ohio State. We played together at Sacramento 1 year as well.
Which is wild, right? Y'all played.
I know we played together, man. We played together. We used to sit there and talk. We both came off the bench at that time in Sacramento, man. We was like, man, can you believe this, man? We high school together, you know, coming out, and we played together at Ohio State and all this. And we started our careers together in terms of commentating. And I told him, I said, Jim, I said, man, you went to bigger and better things. He's one of the best commentators by far in the country in terms of his analysis and his professionalism. And I said, Jim, you went to bigger and better things. I got stuck with Pookie and Ray Ray and them. and I did. I'm just being honest. That's predominantly who I work with. I work with kids who grew up like me, right? I go in the prisons. I go into the schools. I go into high need populations. That's me, and I share my story. Then they realize, oh, okay, he knows where I stand because he's been there himself. So that's purpose. Even though I was thinking that I was going to have this career in commentating, that door got shut, right? You know, and it hurt, and that hurt me. And then I started realizing there's some things that I can do and still have success and get paid for them, right, and make a lot of money. But I realized that it's not always what meets the eye when it comes to your inevitable purpose that you're shaped and designed to complete on this earth.
I want to ask you're unique because what I notice is that I can say this majority of athletes that I know,
Yeah.
they're one dimensional.
They're one
They
dimensional.
only
Yeah.
feel they can excel in sports.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what
That's
I've
right.
learned is that I'll say for my mental health, the same commitment I had to working out every day
Yeah.
is literally the same
Absolutely.
commitment I have,
Absolutely.
and that's why it works.
Absolutely.
But for some reason, they can't transfer that skill.
Yeah, yeah, but you got to think about it. You got to think about this. Their identity is wrapped up in who they were. Now, what happens when you take that uniform off? Like I said, and you go in that phone booth. It's over, dude. It's over. So for them, when they say it's over, how do they hear it and how does it sound? So the semantics and the acoustics, because the optics have changed. You're not there. You're not that guy anymore. So how do you deal with that? And it's tough, man. It's tough. Just like my wife. I remember when I retired, I remember she said, go take the trash out. You talking to me? Now, I could be a tough guy, or I can do what? Take the trash out. So I took the trash out. Again, you can't hide behind, we got road trip, or I got this, I got that, I got this, a benefit to go to. There's no more of that. Now you have to deal with that. You can't make excuses. And I tell guys this all the time. And I'm saying it by myself. It's easy to give a piece of yourself to all of these different people, right? I'm talking about the ladies, right? But to give yourself to one woman, to give your heart. Now think about this for a second. Well, I talked about oxytocin. I led with that. Your heart is called the cardiovascular hormone, and that's oxytocin. Because now you have to bond with that person. It says the two shall become one. Now, what you gonna do? What about when she gets on you? Now, like you said, this guy, he says he needed the roar of the applause. What about when someone gets on you or criticizes you? How you gonna deal with that? Yes, athletes are tough, but a lot of them are incredibly sensitive and fragile as well because of the brokenness of that little boy, that voice who's still talking to them and following them, as I said. It's going to follow you just like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. When you get to your next destination, you're going to hear that what? Beep, 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 beep.
It's funny you said that little boy because when I was dealing with the therapy, you know what the lady said, Fire? She said, first I got to find who driving my ship.
Wow. Wow.
Then when I found it was a little ass boy driving my ship, I'm a grown man.
Wow. Wow. Took the oar.
Driving my ship. I'm a grown man. It's a little boy driving my ship.
Mm-hmm. But think about the inner city kids. I use this analogy. I'm glad you said this because so many of the young men that we work with, that you've worked with, that I work with, who without having a sense of purpose in life, and your daddy should be the one who puts you in the back seat and he's your tour guide. That's what he's supposed to do. Driving you around. Hey son, hey daughter, here's what you can do if you do this. Okay, let's move to the next place. Hey, this is it. But what ends up happening, that's why you got the Kia boys and the Kia girls. Because if you don't have that tour guide, let me go ahead and grab the wheel myself. When you haven't even gone through in cars, you haven't even gone through this, right? So then you don't have a sense of purpose. You don't have a daddy who's guiding you and giving you some vision and some direction in terms of what's your life. So then now you have a ship that it may go somewhere, but it's not going to reach its intended destination. And that's exactly what you're showing when you're saying, when you're reflecting on that little boy who actually grabbed the reel. Now he's the captain of the ship, but he's not necessarily qualified to have the right GPS coordinates to get you where you need to go in life. He's not qualified.
I don't think professional athletes should get married.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
I don't think they should.
Well, why? You got because you.
All right.
Come on.
Unless it's like you met this lady in high school or something.
Okay.
This is the thing.
Okay, I see where you
go. You need to make a marriage work. It's like you're playing marriage. You have to be so. You know this. You have to be so committed to that craft to stay in the league.
Yeah.
Is it kind of realistic to provide what's needed to sustain the family?
That's a great question.
And can you rebuild the family when you have time?
Yeah. So I wear this. It's got a bunch of diamonds and gold and white gold, yellow gold, and in terms of being married, in terms of being committed. So I'm going on, it'll be 27 years. It was August 11th, 1998, almost 3 decades. Yeah, almost 3 decades, right? Hasn't been perfect. There's been some turbulence, of course. But I realized we did meet in college. We didn't have a prenuptial agreement. Now, I tell people, you want my professional opinion or my personal opinion, right? Professionally, when obviously you come into this money, hey, you might want to think seriously and consider this prenuptial agreement just in case things don't go right. But there's also that cloud too of we can get out of this because of that, right? So it's a kind of a perpetual storm cloud possibly hanging over that. But personally as well, you got to get a chance to know the person. That's why I told my wife, I said, look, I said, you ain't going nowhere and I ain't going nowhere. There was a old group back in the day, or a duo, Sonny and Cher. And I got you, babe. There was a song, I got you, babe. No, I got you. Now, I don't hold my wife hostage or anything like that. But I think there has to be a level of commitment that you have to have in a marriage. But I do understand what you're saying because something's got to give. You're saying, how can I be committed to this craft or wanting to be great and wanting to be excellent each and every day and at the same time give 100% of myself to this particular individual who we're one. But I just think for a lot of guys, and I'm thinking of for a lot of guys too who have very addictive personalities, having a wife for me was good because I took my wife with me. She traveled.
Cool everything out.
Huh?
Cool everything
Yeah,
out.
she traveled. She traveled. Some of the guys didn't like that, right? Because, hey, Miss Funny coming. Look, man, look, hold on. No, I said, look, I almost got into it with a couple guys. I said, look, whatever you got going on, that don't have nothing to do with my wife. That don't have nothing to do. My wife's not a snitch. She's not there to tell on it. None of that. I told her, I said, Manya in her is Arabic. It means ultimate wish in Arabic. I said, look, that don't have nothing to do with you. Whatever you see, that's on them, right? And most of them who had all the extramarital affairs and the mistresses, guess what? They're not married anymore. They're not married anymore. So I said, that's their business. But it was hard because she was very close to their wives, right? And she saw. We go out to a restaurant, Ruth Chris, Morton Steakhouse. We look over in the corner. Damn, like that's my teammate over there, right? That's not his wife. And then I had guys. We're in the playoffs. We're in the playoffs, playing against the Lakers. I had a teammate, or maybe two, who made their wives stay in a hotel away from with the team hotel, and they allowed their mistresses to stay in the same hotel as the team. That's some, I'm not a cussing guy, but you can imagine what I'm about to say. That's wrong. So you're setting yourself up for failure. And I agree. If you're not ready to be committed, you're right, man. Don't get married. No, but don't do it because if you're not going to buy into it, if you're not going to be committed in terms of that, right? Because my wife, she would travel, she would come in, and I know some people didn't like that, but I needed her there for me. I didn't care about what anybody else thought. But you got to make a commitment. It's got to be lifelong. And then for us too, as a family, in terms of our religious connection, that is what sustained us, right? My mother and father weren't married. My wife's parents got divorced. So you see, you have some things working against us. But I do understand what you're saying. I think there's a lot more benefits than not, because if you're willing to make it work with the marriage, it can. The problem is a lot of guys, I mean, you go to games, you see that. And if you still got that up in you, you're going to get caught. It's never going to work because you're going to always be straddling the fence in terms of you wanting to be married and you wanting to be a player. You just can't do both. You can't do both.
How did you get to that point? Like that's a big time decision. Like, how did you get to the point where you said, babes, come on the road with me? Because that environment is very machismo, right? And there's a certain code.
Yeah, it is a code. Yeah,
absolutely. You're not breaking the code.
No, I'm not breaking the
code.
But
you're impeding on the code.
I agree with you, man.
So
I agree.
Like, how did you make that decision to say this is what I'm dealing with?
First of all, I didn't worry about what anybody said, and then they weren't going to step to me. I'm not a tough guy, but I'm certainly going to put my foot down and none of that stuff. When it comes to my wife and my kids, I'm going to do whatever it takes to take care of them and to protect them. But I do understand you're right, because a lot of guys felt like you're impeding on a code. I never heard this before, but you're exactly right. It is impeding on a code because they feel like if I walk in the hallway Or if I walk in downstairs in the lobby, what if Mrs. Fundy sees me with my mistress, right? How's that gonna make me look? And she knows, and she's close to my wife, right? But for me, it was more for my benefit in our marriage than it was to appease them in terms of what they did. So, and I had to convince her, because there's a lot of times she didn't want to go on the road just because of that, because of what she could see. And she used to be on the same plane with some of their mistresses.
That's great.
So I played 20 years ago. So imagine what the game is like now.
All the confusion. Another thing I wanted to talk on too, man, was like in regards to the NBA now, right? Or athletes. They do get a bad rap for the womanizing. A lot of dudes don't womanize. Some dudes do.
Right.
How much does insecurity and just stress relief play in their sexual endeavors?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people don't understand why they're
No doubt.
doing it, you know? So as a
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, biochemistry. So we look at the neurotransmitters, which deal with the nervous system. Now you have to look at the endocrine system, which deals with the bloodstream, specifically testosterone. And there's another one called vasopressin, which is kind of like your warrior hormone, right? To be able to fight, to be able to go, right? But testosterone too, and they know this, that athletes in general typically have higher levels of testosterone than the general public. So what testosterone obviously helps your mood, helps your memory, but it also helps your moxie, right? So you deal with that. And that the problem for a lot of guys, and this, I tell guys this, and I say, man, if I share this stuff with you, don't use it, right, to take advantage. Just like I said too, everybody knows that the ladies that have the daddy issues are the easiest ones to, everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? But also too, women will gravitate to men because of the higher levels of testosterone. And
just
because
ooze it, bro.
Huh?
They just ooze it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a competition. When you think about the kingdom, I know the animal kingdom, typically the ones that have the higher testosterone levels are the ones who actually are able to mate, right? So that's why a lot of them, so it's not always the groupie, man, it's biochemical too, right? In terms of that, being around and being in the presence and all of that stuff, you know, man, some guys, 2 girls, 3 girls, 4 girls in one day, right? And also the testosterone, guys, because having novelty, and that's what testosterone does, allows them, unfortunately, to have multiple sex partners in one day, right? Differently, right? So that's why a lot of this is all biochemical, man. And for people to understand, and that's why if your outlet in your brokenness with those insecure attachments that you don't have, you're going to have a drink, it's going to be a drug, or it's going to be a drift, right? That's just usually what happens. So therefore, there has to be something, marriage, hopefully a relationship with the Most High, that gets you to say, man, I don't need that. I can walk away from my vices in terms of internally impulses and instincts, that I can really think and plan, and I don't have to go down that path. But man, it is difficult, right? And if you don't have a game plan, you're just gonna get sucked up into it over and over again. And now you see it. You see all these guys, I see them with the baby here, baby there, or whatever, and it's just like, man, they don't understand. This is why I like the oxytocin. That oxytocin is based on touching. It's touch. It's touch. You physically touch. That some guys, it may not be a sexual number. It may be the act and what they get from the release. And that's where a lot of guys, and I know this is stuff, you know, talking about this, but we got to talk about this because these things are happening, not just for athletes, but going downstream. Look at the young kids. Look at how they're getting caught up in this sex game as well.